and the introduction was a lead off with a joke about chickens. I don't have any chicken jokes today, but we're very happy to have him here, and we'd like to welcome Governor Edwards to the stage now.
Good afternoon, and thank y'all. It's a pleasure to be back with you today. I appreciate, tell you how much I appreciate the invitation. First time I've been here since the campaign, and I'll tell you, we've been busy both finishing up the campaign and getting the administration started. As you know, we've had a few natural disasters and emergencies, and certainly some man-made ones too that we've been dealing with, which is why we've had a special session. Now we're in a regular session. Certainly looking forward to a likely second special session. But tremendous challenges around principally the budget deficit that we inherited, the largest in our state's history at $1 billion for the current year and $2 billion for next year. You know, thanks to a lot of good work, both on the part of the administration, but also with the legislature, the deficit for next year is now at $600 million. That's through a combination of revenue that was raised, but also cuts and some efficiencies and savings that we're going to be able to realize principally around the Medicaid expansion, which we estimate in the first year will save upwards of $180 million. But the challenge is the $600 million in state general fund, that deficit is still a very big number for a state the size of Louisiana. And having spent a number of hours going through the budget with Jay Darden and others in the administration, I can tell you that from my perspective, it is not possible to adequately fund what we all believe to be priorities in this state at $600 million in terms of the state general fund deficit for next year, which is why absent a very large but pleasant surprise at the REC meeting on May the 12th, I expect that there will be a second special session in June so that we can achieve some stability in our budget before the start of the new fiscal year on July 1st. I say surprised because reading the tea leaves, there's nothing that suggests that the REC will recognize enough additional revenue to obviate the need for a second special session. No one would be happier than me, however, if a second special session was not necessary or proved not to be necessary. Now, as a result, right now, we are talking about a budget for next year that has substantial cuts, cuts beyond what I believe are appropriate. And they span across the budget, and they relate to higher education, which is particularly problematic because for 8 years, Louisiana led the nation in terms of cuts to state support for higher education. But it also relates to TOPS. It relates to the Department of Health and Hospitals, and currently there are 4 safety net hospitals that are not in the budget, although we've continued to work with all of our private partners trying to negotiate better deals for the state for next year, increase savings in those deals, but keeping them open, and of course that's going to depend upon a little additional, not a little, about $70 million additional revenue just for the hospitals for next year to get to those 4 that currently are not open. But there's also obviously of about $183 million, and then about $50 million year-to-year reduction in K-12 education. This is not the budget I wanted to present, as you all know. It's not the budget I want to see implemented on July the 1st, but it is the budget that I'm obligated to produce under the Constitution that requires a balanced budget. And obviously we took the revenue that was recognized, forecasted by REC. That's the amount of money that we put into our budget. The good news is the budget is a very honest budget in terms of the fact that there are no budget sweeps, fund sweeps. There are no one-time revenues lined up against recurring expenditures. We did not raid the Transportation Trust Fund, but the beauty of the budget really stops about there. There's a lot of things about that budget, obviously, that are very, very problematic. Having spent hours going through that, I know the challenges that the legislature is going to have as well, trying to make the budget a better document than it is, because every time you want to shore up your investment in one place, you actually decrease it somewhere else, and those are also critical items for our state. So with that, and I will tell you that as we're meeting, I believe the House Appropriations Committee is still in session, and they are considering amendments, I think for the first time, to the budget that I presented to them. So you probably will know more, because if you're watching your phones and seeing what's going on in the committee room, then I will know. But if I can answer a question, I will try to do that. I just want to, before I take questions, I do want to tell everybody that I still remain very optimistic about the future of our state. I know that our best days are ahead of us, but it is a real challenge, and I am absolutely determined to fix the state, to put us on a more stable path with predictable and stable revenue that is collected fairly and that is sufficient in order to fund the critical priorities of the state of Louisiana. We are not there today, and we've got some work to do to get there. But I am convinced that we are going to make that happen. It's just, we didn't get into this problem overnight, and we're not going to get out of it overnight. And it's not going to be painless. And in fact, we've already cut more than $230 million state general fund in the current fiscal year since I've become governor. I mean, there's nothing easy or painless about it, but I believe a balanced approach, one that relies on both revenue and cuts, is the way to go. But people don't like either, and I fully understand that. But those are the only two options you have to deal with when you're looking at a deficit and you have an obligation to balance the budget. And so, you know, we're going to keep working very hard. We're going to keep talking to all the members of the legislature, both in the House and the Senate, Republicans and Democrats, in order and the two independents, I shouldn't leave them out, in order to fashion a budget that serves the state of Louisiana well. At present, I am convinced that can only be done with a second special session where we look at some additional revenue opportunities. Now, with that, I think I am ready to take some questions. Ms. Sue.
House Bill 105, which pulled Attorney General's budget out of HB1 and gave him his own budgeting authority. Commissioner of Administration said that he believed it was unconstitutional and would fail in the courts, and that would leave the AG without money. In the meantime, you have the option to veto should it make it all the way through. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it would be problematic to start breaking out different agencies from the general appropriations bill. You know that the Attorney General's office is in the executive branch of government, and I believe the Constitution requires me to submit a single appropriations bill that includes all of the executive agencies. And so to the extent that it would seek to carve it out, I believe that there's likely a constitutional problem. Secondly, I think it's bad policy. And so I know that the Appropriations Committee did favorably move that bill this morning. I don't know if that will survive the entire House, but I think that both for legal and policy reasons it should not. And of course, the Commissioner, he voiced the administration's position on that issue. So for those reasons, you know, we don't support the bill. I don't see that bill is going to become law. Yes, sir.
Governor, I'll ask a yes or no question, and it'll be very simple. If I am a state employee and I have a state-issued cell phone, and I am vacationing in Disney World, or I am laying on the beach while claiming to be on the clock because I have this cell phone, would you define that as being on the clock? Would you define that as working?
I would not.
Okay.
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I can, and I'm sorry, I was supposed to do that the first time as well, I apologize. The question is whether if a state employee is on the clock or working as a state employee, if in fact they are even out of state.
Florida, Kansas, New York.
Something I guess we would all consider to be a vacation, but if they had a state-issued cell phone on their person.
And you have said that you would not, correct?
No, I would not.
And I think everyone would concur with that. That being the case, and Governor, some questions are difficult, I understand that. That being the case, can you please explain to us why you have, or your officials have said that you made a prior commitment to reappoint a board member to the Auctioneers Licensing Board who was indifferent to such activity, and in doing so reneged on your press release of April the 20th, in which you appointed the gentleman that's seated right in front of me, Reverend Freddie Lee Phillips, the first and only African American auctioneer in the history of this state. And on Thursday he received a phone call that you were rescinding that appointment. So,
well,
with respect, sir, I just asked.
Because I believe we accidentally appointed too many people, that I had committed to too many people. Beyond that, I don't know enough to respond to your question.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yes.
One of the latest pieces of the appropriations bill that's come out now is that the amendments that the committee is looking at would eliminate the office of the Inspector General.
I think that's a mistake. The question is there's an amendment, I believe, pending, and I don't know if it's been considered yet by the House Appropriations Committee, that would eliminate all funding to the Inspector General. I think that's a mistake. I believe that the people of Louisiana expect that there's a full-time agency out there that's watching what state government does, and the Inspector General certainly fills that role. You know, I think first of all, the amount of savings that it produces would be insufficient to offset the lack of confidence that I think the people of Louisiana would have that we're paying attention to what we're doing, and that we actually have a watchdog agency in place. And I don't, have they passed that, or you don't know? Okay. Kevin?
On the construction budget, House Bill 2, I was just wondering if you had any advice for legislators who are going to have to go back to their district and explain why the state is funding, for instance, a golf course, but it's not funding an important road or bridge project.
Well, first of all, if that's happening, it's happening because the golf course was already in the program and already money had been spent, bids accepted, and so the project was at a certain point where it didn't make sense, and in fact it would have been very wasteful to turn it off. And as you know, one of the things that I'm trying very hard to do is allocate a larger percentage of the capital outlay program to transportation infrastructure projects, as well as to deferred maintenance of state-owned buildings and on college campuses. So the idea that we're going to choose going forward to build golf courses and not do transportation infrastructure, that's not an accurate portrayal of where we are in the capital outlay bill. But I will tell you that we have significant challenges, not just around the operational budget, which is represented by House Bill 1, but also in the capital outlay budget, where the total amount of the projects that are in the program exceed the bonding capacity by hundreds of millions of dollars. And in fact, it's not just the bonding capacity. We actually have a cash flow problem within the capital outlay program as well, as evidenced in December. For the first time in 30 years, the state actually took out a short-term loan in order to have the cash necessary to keep construction projects ongoing. And in the next 2 years, we can only have one more bond issue. And so we're actually having to take some projects that are in the program and decrease the number of priority one funding available to them in order to try to spread the available cash out across the entire program. So it was years of mismanagement, over-promising, overselling, whatever it was, the capital outlay program that resulted in this. And I haven't had a chance to digest the hundreds of amendments offered today in the House Committee, the Ways and Means Committee, to House Bill 2. But it's my understanding that the overwhelming majority actually took money out of the program to try to make it a program that we can actually live with going forward. And until we shore up the state's finances and get on a more stable path with respect to our construction budget, these are going to be austere times as well.
Cameron Harry has talked about making a 6% decrease from what you proposed in the budget in order to fully fund TOPS. Is that something that's even viable? Do you see that happening, and would you support it?
Well, I would need to see exactly how that. The question is, I think the Appropriations Committee Chairman, Representative Henry, is proposing, I think it's several different things to fully fund TOPS. One of them would be an additional 6% cut per state agency. I would need to see what the 6% translates to.
I think a lot of it comes out of DHH again.
Well, I would think so, because that's really where you go to get the money. You go to higher education and DHH to get the money, and if it's 6% in addition to what we already did, I don't know how I can support that, but I want to see the dollar amounts and see what else he does in the budget that may move money back towards DHH. I would tell you that I think it's a bad idea to simply take across the board cuts, because that's not indicative of the amount of work that you really should put into it to try to figure out where your priorities are. That's the easy thing to do, not the right thing to do. Just to take a set percentage and add it to every agency's cuts, because that simply means you didn't want to invest the time, the effort, the energy to find out where the cuts could be made, where they shouldn't be made, and that sort of thing. So I suspect it's an approach that I cannot support, but I will reserve final judgment on that until I see what the impact of it was.
Governor?
Yes, sir.
We're talking about the infrastructure and transportation. Do you have anything to connect Baton Rouge, Hammond, Lafayette, when it comes to Amtrak? People have to drive or take the bus in order to catch Amtrak. Do you have anything?
I do not. At present, we are looking at commuter rail with a project specifically between Baton Rouge and New Orleans. But there are also some plans looking at commuter rail along the I-20 corridor, North Louisiana as well, that would connect Dallas-Fort Worth ultimately with Atlanta, Georgia on an east-west line. And the line down south would actually allow someone to travel, I think, into Florida eventually, when we're successful doing that. But in terms of getting folks from Lafayette over towards Hammond on the rail, I don't know of anything under consideration. I probably shouldn't give you a blanket no, but it's not something that's reached my level. And of course, with the funding constraints that we're under, there's only so many of these projects that we're going to be able to do. Ms. Beth.
Governor, there's this commission looking at recommendations and you've asked them to move up the timetable. It was set in September. I think you've asked it for May 15th. Have you had any more conversation about?
It just so happens I got a letter Friday from them. And Beth asked the question, we have pursuant to House Concurrent Resolution 11 in the first special session, there was a task force created in order to study comprehensive long-term budget and tax reform. And that report was due to the on September 1st, and in order to provide a template, if you will, for the fiscal session for next year that starts in April. Anticipating the need for a second special session this year and not wanting to pursue any revenue strategies that would be inconsistent with what they're going to recommend that we do next year, I asked them not to give me the full report that's due on September the 1st, but to give me an abbreviated report on some suggestions for revenue options that ought to be considered in the second special session. I asked for that report by May 15th so that we would have time both to discuss it with the legislature, also to frame the call and the agenda for a second special session. On Friday, after the meeting of the task force, Dr. Richardson let me know that he thought that May 15th was a little ambitious, but that he would be looking to get me something maybe a week or so after that, based on the amount of work that they have to do, which didn't surprise me at all. And that if they get me the report by then, it should be in time to inform the call for the second special session.
Governor, as a follow-up, you talked about informing legislators, having conversation about the fiscal situation. Has Cameron Henry chatted with you about any of his plans, like this bill we just heard about the Attorney General, or the one?
I have not had a meeting with Representative Henry about pulling the Attorney General out of House Bill 1 and having a separate appropriations bill for that agency. And so, no, that did not happen, nor did it come up in any of my meetings with the Speaker. Yes, sir. I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am.
Governor, with the cuts to across the board for partnership hospitals, will they be able to operate, and how much of a cut are we looking at here?
Well, we don't really know, because one of the previous questions, the question that deal with cuts to the health and hospitals and how that translates with respect to reductions in the contract amounts with our private partners who are running all of the safety net hospitals, with the lone exception of Lowry County Hospital in Independence, which continues to be state-owned, state-operated. But will we be able to keep those partners in place? First of all, the budget that I presented to the legislature, there were already 4 private partner hospitals that weren't in the budget. Now, we continue to work with all of our partners, trying to restructure, renegotiate those contracts to achieve savings to allow them to stay in place. And that includes those that are currently in the budget and those that are not, because we're going to work extremely hard between now and June 30th to find the revenue necessary to keep them in place. But we know it's important that we renegotiate the contracts, both to somewhat standardize them, because they're all completely different, but also to achieve savings. We are going through that process right now. If as Chairman Henry apparently is suggesting, we take an additional 6% cut from state agencies, that would be 6% from DHH as well, which would probably mean that there would be a much larger cut to the private partner hospitals, and we cannot successfully renegotiate those deals and keep those providers in those hospitals if there are not adequate funds to do so. And so I would have to look and see what those numbers are, but it's probably safe to say that if Chairman Henry's suggestion were to be included in House Bill 1 at the end of the day, safety net hospitals that are presently in the budget likely wouldn't be. You know, and our goal ought to be to reach out and take these other 4 hospitals and bring them into the budget with additional revenue, probably going in the wrong direction there, Madam President. Yes,
Governor,
ma'am.
you said $70 million was what was needed to fully fund partner hospitals. The budget that they approved for Budget Bill HB 105 that they approved for the Attorney General's office was $69 million. Is that your answer?
No, I don't propose taking the Attorney General's budget and transferring it to DHH in order to make sure we can get those private providers in the position to stay in those hospitals for next year. But it is a critical priority that we successfully renegotiate these deals with the private providers, achieve some savings, also some predictability on those contracts, and really a little more uniformity in those contracts as we move forward. And it's going to take a lot of hard work, and we're doing that. I want you to know we're putting in a lot of time. And I want to thank the private partners, because they're all at the table working with us in good faith, including those partners who are not even in the budget as we gather here today. And so I want to thank them for working with us so hard on that. Yes, sir.
Governor, do you believe that legislation should be passed based on scientific evidence that disproves the claims of others who disagree with that? And do you believe that evidence of wrongdoing on the part of a state government agency and or private entities that it deals with should be investigated or continue to be ignored?
That was a compound question, and as a lawyer, I would object to that. Make you ask it every time. The second one dealt with whether I thought alleged wrongdoing ought to be investigated, and so I can give you a affirmative answer to that, and that's yes. As to what the first question was, it really wasn't. It was something about whether I believed that scientific information that ought to be relied upon in terms of informing the decisions we make.
Yeah, should it be used and actually supersede the claims of others that it proves a false?
Well, I think obviously the better course of action is to allow scientific consensus to drive the decision making. Now, when you achieve that level of consensus among the scientists looking into something, you know, that's debatable. I will tell you that sometimes, and I think it happens largely because the folks in the press, the media, are trying to present both sides of a controversy, and so sometimes there will be an issue where if you have 100 scientists and 99 are on one side of the issue and one is on the other side, there are two sides to that issue, but I'm not sure that both sides are entitled to equal time in the press. And so, but we do see that. But in terms of how we as governmental leaders ought to make decisions, I believe that we're better off not denying science, and that we accept scientific consensus where it exists.
This has to do with DNA science.
Well, in the criminal justice area, I don't know, maybe we've spent enough time on this particular issue, but I'm not sure what you're asking. Yes, sir.
Governor, why did you oppose the bill that would have created a single governing board for higher education?
Well, first of all, the question is, why do I oppose a bill that would create a single governing authority for higher education? There is no best practice in this nation when it comes to higher education governance. And so long as we are talking about governance, we are ignoring the real problems. The real problem associated with higher education in Louisiana today is for a number of years, we've led the nation in terms of our reduction of state general fund support for higher education. And in fact, over that same 8-year period, we've increased tuition more and fees more than any other state at the same time. And so the problem with education isn't with the governance structure. Secondly, I can tell you that I don't believe that the support is there, and I don't support it, for getting rid of the LSU board, which oversees a number of things, but most critically, the flagship agenda for the A&M campus in Baton Rouge. Secondly, without the Southern University Board of Supervisors, the only historically black college and university board in the country would go away. I don't support that because I don't believe it leads to a better higher education system, and I believe it is not helpful to spend so much time, effort, and energy in that direction when we have such obvious problems in higher education that do need to be addressed. And it's my understanding that the legislature, I think last week, decided not to advance any of those bills. Yes, sir.
Since you met with President Obama in January, I believe it was, we've had some congressional updates, but have you gotten any new insight into what's going to be done about the Interstate 10 bridge?
Well, that's a great question. I will tell you that a couple of weeks ago, we formally submitted the application for the grant. This is a discretionary competitive grant from the U.S. Department of Transportation that comes out of the FAST Act, which was part of the transportation bill that Congress passed, and is designed to allow freight to move more freely along congested critical federal highways. And of course, we believe that I-10 is a congested critical corridor, and there are some problems obviously in Louisiana as it relates to I-10. We have a project that we believe satisfied all of the requirements of that act. It actually happens to be over on the stretch of I-10 between the Chapel Basin and I-49 in Lafayette. We've asked for $100 million. We will, if we're successful, and we will know in the next 3 or 4 weeks, and I don't have the exact time frame, but it's going to be in the next 3 or 4 weeks. If we're successful, then we will do that project to both reconstruct and widen I-10 between I-49 and the Chapel Basin, but also freeing up the same amount of money that would fix the Washington Street exit here in Baton Rouge. We will get a new off-ramp and on-ramp on I-10 in New Orleans to service the new terminal. And then there will be some funds also to do some upgrades as it relates to the rail corridor between Baton Rouge and New Orleans. So all three, and by the way, if we get the full $100 million, we will also go to Bossier and finish the construction of the on-ramp and off-ramp of I-20 at Barksdale Air Force Base. If you go there now, you see that they got started, but they just stopped. And we actually have a 4-star Air Force general assigned to Barksdale now. It's one of the major commands in all of the Air Force. And it's going to have nuclear capacity pretty soon. And I think it's time the state of Louisiana follow through with that investment because so long as we have a situation like that, anytime you're going to have a base realignment commission or some study about downsizing, you unnecessarily invite scrutiny from the folks in Washington because of a perceived lack of commitment. And so for all of the reasons, we're going to go up to Bossier and do that as well. But I'm excited. I think we're well positioned to get a substantial award, if not the $100 million, hopefully at least $60 million, because we can do all of those projects except for the one up at Bossier. But it'll be harder next year because this was the first year we happened to have a project that was ready to go. Now that the whole nation knows what the FAST Act looks like, every state will have projects next year that will be able to compete for the same amount of funding. So we're hoping to do some really good things in this first year. Yes, ma'am.
Aside from Medicaid expansion, what's your favorite bill you've signed into law so far?
Well, I don't know that I have a favorite bill. Anytime we do something recognizing heroes, I think that's critically important. And so the other day I signed a bill into law that in fact I've done it several times, that names stretches of highways in Louisiana for heroes here, whether it's a state police officer who was killed in the line of duty over in Cameron Parish last August, I think it was, August or September, or other folks that we have. I mean, those are the sorts of things that you feel good about because you're giving recognition to heroes. But the biggest bills are obviously not through the process yet. I will tell you, I've gotten a lot of attention about the pink color that ladies want to wear when they go hunting. And I did sign that into law, and so hopefully that will spur some additional people to go out and become hunters. Yes.
Since you were talking about heroes, since we have at least one in your cabinet, which is a youth of Syrian Lebanese origin, And since there are at least 3 Ralph Abraham, Stanley, and Derek Graves also seated in the origin in the U.S. House, what are your plans to bring some Syrian refugees here to Louisiana? Because there are a lot of Syrian Lebanese who have been here for a couple of centuries.
I don't have any plans. So,
Why not?
well, that's a second question there. Yes, sir.
And this is going to be our last question.
Governor, you see how difficult it is to balance the budget under all the strictures of our Constitution. Can we really reform and fix Louisiana without a new Constitution?
That's a good question, and I made this comment last week at the Rotary Club meeting in Baton Rouge. If given the largest budget deficit in our state's history and all of the instability that has produced here in our state, and the threat that it poses to funding critical priorities across the board, and given this task force that was created as a result of a negotiated compromise for the specific purpose of recommending an approach to long-term structural tax and budget reform, if the legislature, by April of next year, when we start that fiscal session, isn't able to come together and enact comprehensive tax and budget reform, I believe at that point the only option left is a constitutional convention. It does not have to be a constitutional convention where we take the entire Constitution and open it up for changes. You can have a more limited convention to just open up those parts that you want to deal with, and I believe the tax part would be critically important going forward. I'm not prepared to say that we are there today, but if we don't have a lot more success in that session that starts in April, I believe that's the only choice that we have left.
Thank you, Governor.
Thank you.
How are you? Very good. Thank you. You guys said you could take in something. I got a quick question.
She said she called you.
First time I used it.
Okay, all right. I'm sorry.
Maybe my questions I couldn't answer. You may have noticed that question. Good try. One, we allow apartments about $5,000 everything's prioritized automatically.
We have to drag the governor away from some of these guys that go on for whatever.
So previously, they prioritized the printing, property, Santa Claus was CFO of LSU at LEBI. When they said they were doing it to save money, I said, well, now all the departments can spend whatever they want to. And I said, you can spend up to $5,000 to get a person. So we're allowed to. CFO shut her down. That kind of thing still exists, although they did reduce it. print and copy center, which had 200,000 mailboxes. And they also gave output mail, suspended money, like a gas pump, which is my expertise. And put a contract in place for 10 years.
Yeah, just to tag and make sure we have everything clear.
They are now, the RFP out, they're supposed to have an answer. They're working with their staff to redo the same thing because it's been such a failure. Now, during that period of time, your staff, Jay and the rest of the people, in fact, I met with your head of purchasing. Well, actually, he called me Friday afternoon about 6 o'clock because he found that maybe when I might talk today. He's moving back to general counsel. But I met with him a few weeks beforehand about some of the savings that Jay and I worked as far back as 2000. My point is, I'm now asking you to hold the public, because when we're talking about wasting $140,000, that's insignificant of what LSU's going to waste again. And I want to just tell you privately, because you and I have seen each other, when all this was going on, we couldn't figure out how to fund this yet. So I'm sitting in an administrative meeting in Alexandria, the head of purchasing walks up to me and says, I think we figured out how to fund this. Every student on campus has asked to bring in $30,000 a month as a private company that can pay us. It's apparent that was all I could do to just remain calm. That's the same program that after I talked with your staff, they said, let me go and write questions. You know, they never responded to them. How did they audit? What did we spend on money? Whose credentials to audit? So this disaster you put out again was supposed to be the 28th. You only have the bullpup. So I was sitting at the legislature with the chancellor when we did the audit they did separately. You can see I'm not a professional, but I am worried about these underprivileged kids at $150,000 just disappeared. So they scouted out. Yeah, but here's what I think. I realize it. I'm being to have conversations with last year. I'm aware of that. Very aware of that. So, we do it as a government.
Just if you're secretary as far as female students, we understand exactly what the situation is, and it has to do with pro bono PR work that I'm doing for organizations here and elsewhere to help stop child sex slave trafficking. It's a very important issue.
Human trafficking?
Human trafficking in children. And we've had the Chris Ferrara, the president of the American Catholic Lawyers Association, down here from New Jersey, and he can't believe the amount of evidence that just isn't being investigated, no matter who we give it to.
I will. I'll take a look at it. And to be honest with you, I couldn't. I knew generally what you were asking, but I didn't know the exact
I just wanted to put that out there because it's that ridiculous. The answer should be obvious, but it's not happening.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I'm Reverend Freddie Phillips, the one that we sent the order on. I have a problem with that. One of the things that concerned me more than anything else was I went through all the process of doing all the paperwork. I got the notification and the press release on the 20th, and then they waited until 5 days before the meeting to call me and inform me and let me go through the whole rigorous process of doing everything, and then rescind the order, the appointment. That was to me somewhat disheartening.
I understand. And we made a mistake, and I apologize. We committed to more people than we should have, and I had to rescind one and I rescinded yours.
Well, Ms. Jacobs, she was the one, and she didn't have any knowledge of it. And the thing that really troubled me more than anything else, and I felt like this personally, is what I uncovered about things that went on the board.
He's the one that reported the payroll fraud.
Promoted all this stuff from happening. And I told Ms. Parmentier the same thing. I said, look, if the governor doesn't want integrity in his office and in on his commissions, as it relates to the things that pertain to my industry, the auctioneer's industry, I uncovered the payroll fraud. the eyes hear stuff, all the things that went on that was an embarrassment to not only our state, but my profession. And, you know, Ms. Jacobs, I have a work relationship. She didn't have a problem. But, you know, she was not, and she informed me of this, that she was not even aware that she was still on the board. And she didn't have a problem with that. But when it came down from Ms. Palmatier that there was been an overcommitment, you know, she waited at the last minute, so it happened.
Well, we discovered the overcommitment at the end. I apologize to you. I don't know what more I can tell you other than we made a mistake. I had to fix the mistake, and somebody had to come off.
But she was already on the board prior to. She was already serving 4 years, and then the reappointment came. You know, and my thing was this right here. I set off and rescinded a second term in the governor's office only because he wasn't doing anything to fight justice as relates to what was going on. I mean, my thing is this: I have nothing personal against you or your office or what is transpired.
No, against you. Yeah, but that's not fine. It just was a mistake. So, I mean, I don't know what nobody can tell you other than we made a mistake.
Can you state to whom the commitment was made? Because Ms. Palmentier would not state that it was to Ms. Jacobs.
And I want you to tell you that I have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of folks, and I can't tell you right now, not because I don't want to, but because I don't have the information. Yes, sir. Claremont Press.